Well, the Witcher 4 trailer debuted during this year's Game Awards, and seeing Ciri as the main protagonist and also as a Witcher is causing reactions that are, well, sadly typical. And there was one aspect of the response that sent me down the Witcher lore rabbit hole. Apparently, one of the biggest problems people have with the trailer is that Ciri shouldn't be a Witcher because, according to the malcontents, women can't become Witchers. So, I decided to look into this. And I found a handful of things. First, a lot of these folks are seemingly unfamiliar with the previous game, The Witcher 3. Second, they also seem unfamiliar with what the lore actually says. And third, the devs have some very good answers to questions about all of this. So, let's take a look at what I found, because after we look at the previous game, interviews, the lore, and other great fantasy stories, I think the matter is pretty settled that Ciri can definitely become a Witcher. Now, if you like this kind of content, be sure to hit like and subscribe, and also check out the live stream that followed this video. It's awfully pesky when the previous game has an actual scene that undercuts all the rage and misinformation floating around, especially since it would make folks have to suddenly have a problem with the Witcher game that's considered the best in the series. More than that, it's considered one of the best story-driven action RPGs out there. In the wake of all the bluster about whether or not Ciri could be a Witcher, this scene from The Witcher 3 cropped up.
It's yours.
A witch's sword. Swallow. Ooh, beautiful. May I?
Not here. You'll have ample opportunity soon enough, Witcher.
Now, there are a handful of things to notice about this clip. Obviously, and most notably, Geralt calls Ciri Witcher. I expect a lot of videos to come out about just how dumb Geralt is and how he apparently doesn't know about the lore and how he's ruining the game. Now, in addition to him calling her a Witcher, there is also significance to the sword itself. In a previous scene, it is stated that no Witcher has or ever had a better weapon. More than that, it is one of the choice weapons of Witchers due to their effectiveness against certain supernatural enemies like wraiths, vampires, and more. So this scene is a pretty solid mic drop in my opinion, but there's still more to consider. He doesn't just give her the sword, it seems to indicate that she's about to become a Witcher and do the work of a Witcher. But beyond this scene, there's actually more things to look at with respect to the lore and other great stories. All of my research into the lore made something very clear to me. Lots of people that are speaking about something in a way that they either don't understand or they are just willfully misrepresenting it. The fact of the matter is, there is no hard lore anywhere that states women cannot become Witchers. It's actually quite different than that. The lore shows that they simply aren't strong enough to make it through the required mutations. They either end up ill and eventually die, or they just die in the process. In other words, it's not a hard and fast rule. It is something that has been attempted, and nobody that has tried to has been able to survive, which is a very common story trope in fantasy stories. They establish something that seemingly nobody is strong enough to do, and then somebody strong enough comes along and does it. Here are some great examples. In the Wheel of Time books, not the TV shows, in the books, there is something called the One Power, and the male side of the One Power was tainted by the Dark Lord for 3,000 years. It's a pretty awesome and pivotal moment when the main character figures out that he's strong enough to cleanse the One Power. It leads to a huge turning point in the book. So something thought previously impossible suddenly happens because somebody's strong enough. Or how about more recently, in the MCU movies, they made it seem like nobody was going to be strong enough or worthy to wield Thor's hammer. It was a pretty awesome moment in the theaters when Captain America was able to call Thor's hammer to himself and whoop up on Thanos in Avengers Endgame. Or how about when Neo isn't just the chosen one in the Matrix, but he's strong enough and smart enough to break the never-ending cycle of the Matrix? Or how about Captain Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation? He's the first person to come back from the Borg without being fully assimilated, something thought previously impossible. These are all huge moments in famous movies or stories or shows that there was something that nobody thought could be done and somebody overcomes it with great strength or force of will. Well, this might be another surprise to all of these gaming tourists who don't seem to know the lore about Ciri and The Witcher. Ciri is not a normal woman. She has something called elder blood. This makes her basically a demigod, capable of unusual power and abilities. So, just like all the examples I already cited, this isn't out of step with a common fantasy storytelling trope. You create a thing that can't be achieved because nobody seems to be strong enough to do it, and then you introduce a character with something unique about them that allows them to do it. Are you still not convinced? Well, let's take a quick look at what the devs are saying if you're still worried about this. There are two different bits of information from interviews that I think are especially helpful here. One comes from an interview with Paris Lilly, and you can watch the full 18-minute interview on his YouTube channel, but a snippet that stands out pertains to this very subject. At the 9-minute and 23-second mark, Sebastian Kalemba is answering a question about how much time has passed between The Witcher 3 and The Witcher 4. Check it out.
I'm assuming some time has passed since The Witcher 3 with Ciri, because Ciri definitely seems more seasoned now. She seems like a true Witcher from what we saw in this. So anything you can elaborate on that?
Yes, definitely. Like, okay, I started and then pass the mic. Yeah, there's definitely a few years later. And she's on the track. You've for sure spotted that she's already mutated. And that one of our key elements of this game is that you will experience becoming the Witcher for the very first time, and you will be the very first time the Witcher by choice.
Some big takeaways here is that he says she's already mutated and that you will experience becoming a Witcher for the very first time. This means that when you see her in the trailer, she's already mutated. She's already gone through it and survived, and that we're actually going to experience that mutation in the game. Now, you have to combine this interview with another one because they are cognizant of the lore, seemingly more than the folks who are upset about this. He also said that this will be the very first time you will be the Witcher by choice. So they are clearly setting her up in the previous game with the scene we already looked at that she will become a Witcher, and they actually have lore reasons that she's able to do it. But if you're actually so concerned about canon, in an interview with IGN, they do acknowledge there's another potential ending different than the one where she gets the sword and she's about to become a Witcher. There is an ending where it seems like Ciri dies, but according to the franchise and lore designer, quote, there are hints in that ending that highlight the fact that she probably does not die, says Mar. And so regardless of the events you personally witness at the end of your own Witcher 3 playthrough, the sequel will not, quote, break any canon or even offend any canon. This to me is all I need to hear from the devs. They are aware of potential issues and they aren't going to break canon. They're not going to offend canon. As someone who has been frustrated by both the way Star Wars has treated its own lore or things that happened in the Rings of Power TV show, I am actually in the corner of anybody who doesn't want the lore to be messed with. But I think we've established a pretty strong case here. It is clear to me that there is no rigidity in the lore about women becoming Witchers. It's something that was tried and it just didn't work because people weren't strong enough to survive the trials or the mutations. And like in so many other great fantasy stories, they set up Ciri in The Witcher 3 to do this. She has elder blood, which would make her strong enough to survive the trial and the mutation, and the previous protagonist, Geralt, gives her a silver sword and calls her Witcher in what is considered the good ending for The Witcher 3. So you have to be logically consistent here just to maintain the rage and the anger. Number one, you have to misrepresent the lore and claim it is impossible for women to become a Witcher when the lore makes no such claim. It only claims that people try and they die in the process. Secondly, you have to ignore that Geralt gives her a silver sword and calls her Witcher. Again, I can't wait to see those videos where people say that Geralt is dumb, woke, or ruining the lore of the game. Third, you have to ignore the fact that she has elder blood. She's basically a demigod. They have quite literally set her up to be the person who could do it, who is strong enough to survive. And fourth, you have to ignore the dev interviews where they say they won't break canon, and they're going to let us experience Ciri becoming a Witcher in the game. So as I said, with just a little bit of research, I think the issue to me is settled. Ciri can definitely become a Witcher. And I can't wait to play the game when it finally comes out, but those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can leave a comment below. You may get featured in the live stream that follows this upload. It hits a card right here. I also put a pinned comment below with a link to that live stream. And as always, if you like this content in this video, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.